So this young girl, Katie, walks up to me, and she asks if we can play pretend. Now, I'm not quite sure what she means by this, but I go along with it anyway. So she grabs my hand and she pulls me to the corner of the room. "This is our house," she says to me. Okay, well, we are in an actual house. We're in the corner of the room, but that doesn't matter. We're playing pretend. Out of nowhere, she yells, "Look, there's a fire. We have to move." So we race to the other corner of the room. "This is our new house," she says to me. And we continue to play this game, moving from one house to the next, over and over, for what feels like an hour. And this is just one memory out of many that I, Miah Monroe, have from volunteering at the Children's Place. So the Children's Place is a nonprofit organization where parents can drop off their kids during the day. The children engage in many different activities, inside and outside. There's also a snack time, a time for them to read, and it really is a great place for children to meet new kids and engage in new activities. So for my project, I volunteered there, and I met all of those kids that you see up there. This particular kid up here, he liked me a lot. He would follow me around. Every time he saw me, he would drop what he was doing and he would run right up to me. It was the cutest thing ever, and I really enjoyed my time there. But also for my project, I researched childhood adversity, how it impacts the brain, and if there's hope. So, what is childhood adversity? Well, it is any difficult experience where the child is unable to cope. This could be as simple as moving from one house to another, or as complex as sexual abuse. Other examples include child abuse and neglect, exposure to violence, and family economic hardship or poverty. Just under half, 46% of children in the United States have experienced at least one form of adversity. That means that you, or the person sitting next to you, has most likely experienced adversity. So, why did I bring up Katie's story? Why is it important? Well, I didn't tell you this, but it turns out later that day, I found out she was moving in real life. Wow. So we weren't actually playing pretend. Now, her house didn't actually burn down, and she wasn't moving more than once, but that doesn't matter. She was still moving in real life, and it was changing, it was affecting her thoughts and her emotions. This may not have been a traumatic experience for her, but it was still affecting her brain. And adversity does something similar. It gets under our skin and it changes our physiology. Well, how does it do that? How does it actually change our physiology, our brain structure? Well, when a child experiences something traumatic or adversity, their heart pressure or their heartbeat goes up, their blood pressure increases. Their body releases a stream of stress hormones, such as cortisol and adrenaline. And these stress hormones, they start to kill off dendrites, those tiny branches in brain cells that send and receive information. And over time, this stress becomes toxic, which in other words means there's an excess amount of cortisol or adrenaline in the body. And this is what disrupts developing brain circuits and causes dramatic damage. Well, where exactly in the brain is all of this occurring? Scientists have found that it affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, as pictured up there. This is the pleasure and reward center of the brain, which is connected to substance dependency. It also affects areas like the prefrontal cortex, and this controls impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. Scientists have also found measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So up here on the right, those are two PET scans. The one on the left is a healthy brain, and you can see which areas of the brain are more activated, the brighter colors, and which areas are less activated, the darker spots. And you can see that the temporal lobes there's a lot of activity in those regions. And that is good because during early developmental stages, when a child is learning new information and engaging in new activities, this part of the brain is activated. The brain on the right, that is actually the brain of a Romanian orphan who was institutionalized right at birth. And you can see there's way less activity in the temporal lobes. And basically, this picture shows the effect of extreme deprivation in infancy. And unfortunately, the orphan suffers from cognitive and emotional problems. So I talked a lot about adversity and what it does and how it changes us, but is it possible to overcome? Well, I met with Dr. Pam Gallant, a child psychologist who works right here in Bow, and we talked about treatment and trauma. She explained to me that there are a variety of techniques used in therapy to help people overcome childhood adversity. And one thing we talked about, something she specializes in, so she got training for this, is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. And she actually let me try it out and take a look at it. Basically what it is there's a bar, and there's a light that moves back and forth, left to right, left to right. And the therapist can increase the speed and decrease it as well. So as the patient follows this light with their eyes back and forth, the therapist helps them remember the traumatic experience or memory. And this simple action of watching the light go back and forth helps rewire the brain to desensitize the experience. It helps them remember the experience, but without reliving it, without seeing the same images and without feeling all of the same senses. It basically, the memory becomes less emotionally charged. They see it from almost a different perspective. And what I found really fascinating about EMDR treatment is the way EMDR works is very similar to what occurs naturally during REM sleep, rapid eye movement. And so, in other words, EMDR can be thought of as a physiologically based therapy that can help people overcome trauma. Dr. Gallant, she also talked to me about she also told me about one of her hardest patients who experienced sexual abuse as a child, and she was really having a hard time functioning in society and living. And after about a year of EMDR treatment, she was able to talk about this story and live differently and live a better life. Over 100,000 clinicians worldwide use this therapy, and millions of patients have benefited from it over the past 25 years. And like I mentioned earlier, this is just one technique out of many that can be used to help people who have suffered from adverse experiences. So I think back to Katie, and there's no doubt in my mind that she'll have the support she needs to handle the challenge of moving. She has places like the Children's Place, where she can express her emotions and thoughts. She also has compassionate teachers who can help her through the process. She has a loving family who can give her lots of love and support. And of course, therapy is always an option. All of these tools and resources work because the brain is malleable. It can be rewired. It is possible to help someone think differently about the world and think differently about themselves.